gonna now actually move on to the films,
The meat and potatoes
the
of
meat
this.
and the chubby potatoes.
That's right.
All right. Anyways, we're gonna have you, Nick, start it off with first one. Also, another a little disclaimer: we are going chronologically in order of the storyline, not when the release of the films were. So, and we will not be going over the entire stories for each of the films. We're just gonna give you a little bit of how it all starts out, and then we're gonna go into discussions. We're doing a little different than the Lord of the Rings one. But all right, Nick.
So, Prometheus is a 2012 science fiction horror film, co-produced and directed by Ridley Scott, written by John Speedies and Damon Lindelof, and starring Noam Rapace, Michael Fassbender, Guy Pearce, Idris Elba, Logan Marshall Green, and Charlize Theron. Is set in the late 21st century and centers on the crew of the spaceship Prometheus, as it follows a star map discovered among artifacts of several ancient Earth cultures seeking the origins of humanity. The crew arrives on a distant world and discovers the threat that could cause extinction of the human species. Development of the film began in the early 2000s as a fifth installment of the Alien franchise. Scott and director James Cameron developed ideas for a film that would serve as a prequel to Scott's 1979 science fiction horror film Alien in 2002. The development of Alien vs. Predator took precedence over the project, remained dormant until 2009. Then Scott showed interest. Spadis wrote a script for a prequel to the events of the Alien films, but Scott opted for a different direction to avoid repeating cues from those films. In late 2010, Lindelof joined the project to rewrite Spadis' script, and he and Scott developed a story that precedes the story of Alien but is not directly connected to the original series. According to Scott, although the film shares strands of aliens' DNA and takes place in the same universe, Prometheus explores its own mythology and ideas. Prometheus entered production in April 2010 with an extensive design phase during which the technology and creatures that the film required were developed. Principal photography began in March 2011 and concluded in October 2011. With an estimated $130 million budget, the project was shot using a 3D camera throughout almost the entirety of the practical sets. And the location in England, Iceland, Scotland, Jordan, and Spain. It was promoted with a marketing campaign that included viral activities on the web. 3 videos featuring the film's leading actors in character, which expanded on elements of the fictional universe, were released and met with generally positive reception and awards. Prometheus was released on June 1st, 2012 in the United Kingdom and June 8th, 2012 in North America. The film earned generally positive reviews, receiving praise for the designs, production values, and cast performance, but was criticized for uneven script and unresolved plot points. The film grossed over $403 million worldwide. So a little bit of the plot. As a spacecraft departs a planet, a humanoid alien drinks an iridescent liquid, causing its body to dissolve. Its remains cascade into the waterfall, and the alien's DNA falls apart and recombines. In 2089, archaeologists Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway discover a star map in Scotland that matches others from several unconnected ancient cultures. They interpret this as an invitation from humanity's forerunners, the engineers. Peter Whalen, an elderly CEO of Whalen Corporation, funds an expedition aboard the scientific vessel Prometheus to follow the map to the distant moon LV-223. The ship's crew travels in stasis while the android David monitors their voyage. Arriving in December 2093, mission director Meredith Vickers informs them that their mission to the engineers and not to make contact without her permission. The Prometheus lands on a barren mountainous surface near a large artifactal structure. So we're gonna stop the plot there. There's some actual errors in this film. The small tattoo above Fifield's left eye occasionally disappears throughout the film. So this one's more of like a real life issue with the film. Carbon dating can't be used without knowing the amount of C14 in the atmosphere and its evolution and history. Using this method after arriving on an alien planet is literally impossible. the first scene inside the Prometheus after she comes out of deep sleep, Vickers asks David for a robe and asks how long, meaning how long have they been asleep. David answers 2 years, 4 months, 18 days, 36 hours, and 15 minutes. The actual statement from a highly precise android character would have been 2 years, 4 months, 19 days, 12 hours, and 15 minutes. In the case, or in the scene where the crash escape pod, everything inside is upended, the bookshelf and stuff is strewn everywhere. Yet there's a bottle of vodka that's just somehow just chilling straight up in the background on the bar. The ship travels approximately 35 light years, yet Vickers, Charlize Theron, comments that 500 million miles from Earth, and would just barely get them past Jupiter, maybe even less. So
Thank God she wasn't the captain.
thank God, because they really wouldn't have made it anywhere, unless they were on mushrooms. When Shaw is on the planet surface towards the end of the film, she isn't wearing any gloves, and then later on in that scene, she's actually just has gloves on at some point. I mean, they're minor issues, a lot of them.
Yeah.
I mean, they're movies, so it is what it is. I absolutely love this film. I know it gets a lot of hate from a lot of like alien purists, if you will. But I mean, Ridley Scott had a big hand in this.
Yeah, I mean,
So
if the guy who like helped really start this is doing it, how much can the purists really say? This film does deal way more with body horror than I think prior to the other films per se. So yeah, the sets are beautiful. The quality of the scenes, the like when like I was to go tell you if I met you on the street and just said, hey, like I think that movie's like pleasing to the eye. That would be like that would be like a real good base for me on if you wanted to know what I was talking about. It's just a beautifully shot film. Some great sets. I love the navigations of the engineers, which are like the aliens that kind of created the aliens. So, yeah. So that's what I gotta say about it. I think they're definitely. I don't hate it for sure. So, fun movie.
oh yeah, definitely. So Claudian, why don't you move us on to the next film in the
Yep.
franchise?
So we're gonna move on to Alien Covenant. Is a 2017 science fiction action horror film, directed and produced by Ridley Scott and written by John Logan and Dante Harper. From the story by Michael Green and Jack Pagling. A joint American and British production. The film is a sequel to the Prometheus film, the second entry in the Alien prequel series, and the sixth installment in the Alien franchise overall. Three of which have been directed by Scott. The film features returning star Michael Fassbender with Catherine Waterston, Billy Crudup, Crudup, Danny McBride, Danian Benchar in supporting roles. It follows the crew of a colony ship that lands on a uncharted planet and makes a terrifying discovery. In 2012, prior to the release of Prometheus, Ridley Scott discussed the prospect of a sequel and new trilogy, and this film was confirmed that August. Principal photography began on April 4th, 2016, at Milford Sound in Floreland National Park in New Zealand, and wrapped on July 19th, 2016. FX House Odd Studios and Creature in FX provided the film's makeup and animatronic creature effects. Scott says that the first cut of the film was 2 hours and 23 minutes long, which eventually was edited down to 2 hours and 3 minutes on the release version. Alien Covenant premiered in London on May 4th, 2017, and it was released on May 12th in the UK, on March 19th in the United States. The film received generally positive reviews from the critics, but underperformed at the box office. Its worldwide growth was 240 million against a production budget of approximately 100 million, not including marketing costs. So the plot of the film. In a prologue, the business magnate Peter Wayland speaks with his newly activated android in a lakeside apartment. The android chooses the name David for himself after observing Michelangelo's statue. Um, Wayland states that one day they will search for mankind's creator together. David comments on his own unlimited lifespan as compared to Wayland's, which unsettles Wayland. In in 2104 AD, 11 years after the Prometheus expedition, the colonization ship Covenant is 7 years from reaching planet Orgus 6 with 2,000 colonists in stasis and 1,140 human embryos in cold storage. The ship is monitored by Walter, an advanced android model that physically resembles David. When a solar flare damages the ship, Walter reanimates his 14 human crewmates, themselves couples and future colonists. The ship captain, Jake Branson, is burned alive when his stasis pod malfunctions. While repairing the ship, the crew picks up a transmission of a human voice from a nearby planet, which appears magnetically more habitable than Orgus 6. Despite the protests of Daniels, Branson's widow, that this new perfect planet is too good to be true, the new captain, Christopher Oman, decides they will investigate. With pilot Tennessee maintaining a Covenant in orbit, his wife Maggie flees to lander to the planet's surface, where an expedition team tracks the transmission signal to a crashed alien ship. So that's where we're going to end it for Covenant. So some of the errors in the film. When two of the crews stay behind to take samples, she closes the sample and hands it to him. But in the next shot, he closes it again. This happens at 38 minutes. When Tennessee walks in, the Jack Daniels bottle on the counter is empty, seen from several angles. Then she pours him some in a glass at 1 hour and 41 minutes. Daniel's face gets splattered with blood. In the following shot, there's slightly less blood. Then, when she uses the radio to call back to the others, her face on the screen shows no blood at all. In the other shot, after, it's there again. In the second half of the movie, in the first scene where Daniels is sitting on the ground out in the rain by a laptop, asking the crew of the ship to drop the cargo lift, we can hear her voice loud and clear, but her mouth is not moving. The neomorph is another scene is the neomorph is successfully shot and injured, then runs off through the undergrowth, trailing their acid blood, but leaves no visible damage to the surrounding vegetation. Yeah, so I think the last 25 minutes of the movie is phenomenal. But again, very well shot, beautiful film, but story's kind of lackluster, to be said. But definitely, like I said, I kind of wanted more of that 25 minutes, 30 minutes of the last movie. But yeah, it was an okay movie. I'd probably rate Prometheus like a good 7.5, and then this one probably 6.5, I would say.
That's fair.
What do you think?
So as far as this film is concerned, pretty much the same here on my end. The last like 30-ish minutes,
Hmm.
is really what I wanted to see pretty much from the entire film. And again, you only get it for the last 30 minutes. It's a lot of, the xenomorphs and the necromorphs and just lots of action
Hmm.
that aren't really present. A lot of the stuff is like happens like off screen or and when the stuff does happen on screen, it's just it's over.
Blase, yeah, it's
Yeah.
real quick.
And I don't really care for that much personally. But if I did have to, if rating these, definitely the first one, I love Prometheus.
Yeah.
I easily give it like a 7.5 to an 8. This one, 6 to 7. It's not great. It's not terrible, but it's literally just, I'd basically be rating those last like 30 minutes.
Right.
But with that being said, we'll move on to a
Alien.
much better film.
Yeah, the original. And another thing I didn't like about it was find out what happens to Shaw. I was very disappointed with that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would have
That
liked
was
to.
terrible.
I would actually have liked to have known more, as
Yeah.
opposed to just seeing some simple drawings. But
Yeah. So Nick, you're gonna do, like you said, you're gonna do the big one, Alien, the masterpiece as it is.
yeah, I do, and so Alien is a 1979 science fiction horror film directed by Ridley Scott and written by Dan O'Bannon, based on a story by Dan O'Bannon and Ryan Shusett. It follows the crew of a commercial space tug Nostromo, who, after coming across a mysterious derelict spaceship on an undiscovered moon, find themselves up against an aggressive and deadly extraterrestrial set loose on the Nostromo. The film stars Tom Skerritt, Sigourney Weaver, Veronica Cartwright, Harry Dean Stanton, John Hurt, Ian Holm, and Yelp Koto. It was produced by Gordon Carroll, David Geiler, and Walter Hill through their company Brandywine Productions, and was distributed by 20th Century Fox. Geiler and Hill revised and made additions to the script. Shusett was executive producer, and the Alien and its accompanying artifacts were designed by Swiss artist H.R. Geiger, while concept artists Rob Kahn and Chris Foss designed the more human settings. Alien premiered May 25th, 1979 as the opening night of the 4th Seattle International Film Festival, presented in 70mm at midnight. It received a wide release on June 22nd and was released on September 6th in the United Kingdom. It was met with mixed reviews on release, but was a box office success, winning an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, 3 Saturn Awards, Best Science Fiction Film, Best Director or Best Direction for Scott, and Best Supporting Actress for Cartwright, and a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation. Critical reassessments since then has made Alien widely considered to be one of the greatest science fiction horror films of all time in 2002. Alien was deemed culturally historical or aesthetically significant by the Library of Congress and was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. In 2008, it was ranked by the American Film Institute as the 7th best film in science fiction genre and as the 33rd greatest film of all time by Empire. The success of Alien
By the
spawned
Empire.
yeah, just Star Wars.
Yeah.
The success of Alien spawned a media franchise of films, novels, comic books, video games, and toys. It also launched Weaver's acting career, providing her with her first lead role. So some of the plot: the commercial space tug Nostromo is returning to Earth with several member crew in stasis. Captain Dallas, Executive Officer Kane, Warrant Officer Ripley, Navigator Lambert, Science Officer Ash, and Engineers Parker and Brett. Detecting a transmission from a nearby moon, the ship's computer mother awakens the crew, per company policy requiring that the potential distress signal be investigated. They land on the moon despite Parker's protest, sustaining damage from its atmosphere and rocky landscape. The engineers stay aboard for repairs while Dallas, Kane, and Lambert investigate the terrain. They discover the signal originates from a derelict alien ship and enter it. Losing contact with Nostromo, Ripley deciphers part of the transmission, determining that it was a warning, but cannot relay the information to those on the derelict ship. Meanwhile, Kane discovers a chamber containing hundreds of large egg-like objects, When he touches one of the creature, springs out, penetrates his helmet, and attaches itself to his face. Dallas and Lambert carry the unconscious Kane back to the Nostromo as acting senior officer Ripley refuses to let them aboard, citing quarantine regulations, but Ash overrides her decision and lets them inside. Ash attempts to remove the creature from Kane's face, but stops when he discovers that its extremely corrosive acidic blood could hurt Kane and potentially damage the hull. It later freely detaches and is found dead. The ship is partially repaired, and the crew continue their journey back to Earth. Kane awakens with some memory loss, but seems to be otherwise unharmed. During a final crew meal before the returning to stasis, he suddenly chokes and convulses. A small alien creature bursts from his chest, Kane's chest, killing him, and escapes into the ship, with Ash dissuading the rest from killing it.
Hello, my baby. Hello, my sunshine. Do 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 do. What did he have? He had the special. Check, please.
Gotta love Spaceballs.
Spaceballs, yes.
So some of the errors in this movie, which even as perfect of a movie as this is, it does have problems.
Yes.
When Ripley interfaces with Mother for the first time and sees a special order and instructions read as ensure return of organism rather than ensure return. Continuity mistake in the shot of the alien's tail wrapping around the back of Lambert's legs right before it kills her. The floor is different to what it was before. There is actually water suddenly falling from the ceiling when there wasn't before, and her pants have changed from white to blue. This is because that shot was originally intended to be used when Brett was killed. Another mistake was when Ripley is trying to deactivate the self-destruct mode, the instructions she follows on the container are actually just French interpretation of the instructions she read to activate the self-destruct system before. Another revealing mistake was mirrors were used in the corridors to make them appear longer. In the film, when Brett is complaining to Parker about the way they're treated by the company, you can actually see the reflections in the mirror behind them as they walk down the corridor. It's only there for a second, but it's as they're moving off camera, but you can see them in their white overalls. There's actually visible crew equipment. After Ripley fails to shut off the auto destruct sequence, she runs through a corridor filled with gas. As she exits from the gas right before the shot cuts away, we see her pass a full-size light. Besides the light, you can see a clear arm and head of a light crew member. This is actually acknowledged in the DVD commentary. I absolutely adore this film.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it hundreds of times. I mean, no joke. It's been on TNT, Spike.
I mean, what's there to say about this movie?
I mean, it literally started me on science fiction. This one is like a 9 to a 10, easy for rating. It's fantastic.
Yeah, 100%.
Claudia, why don't you give us a little bit on it?
Yeah. So, like Nick said, not much I can say more about it. I mean, definitely 10 out of 10 for me for this one. But it's a real true masterclass in filmmaking. Very, very young, filmmaker. Ridley Scott had just only worked on one movie prior to this, and that was self-funded. And that was The Duelist. And just having his vision that really brought this to fruition. Like Dan O'Bannon never really didn't know what he was writing in the sense. He literally thought he was just going to be writing essentially a Roger Corman film. I don't know if for those who know may not know, he was famous for doing the $1 million movies, and they basically would shoot stuff in literally one room practically. So a lot of those B cheesy kind of films, sometimes a little bit more production than others, but still. And Dan O'Bannon had worked with John Carpenter on Dark Star. I mean, and that was kind of where he was coming from. And Dark Star was a very comical, very low budget student film that John Carpenter was doing. And he ended up getting so big they actually did end up releasing it in theaters. And then after that, O'Bannon was like, "Oh, I'm going to do this one more time," It worked so well the first time, but this time it's gonna be horror. He met up with Schutz, and they started working on what would be Alien, and then he gets a call by a guy named Alejandro Joaski. I just butchered his last name, but the guy who was going to do Dune, essentially, initially was, and so he went to France, Joraski, yeah, and went to France to work on that for like 6 months, and then there he met H.R. Giger, he met Faust, he met Rob Cobb. I mean, he met essentially the powerhouse people that would really envision this film, and then of course that famously when Kibbutz said nothing happened, he came back to the United States penniless, completely broke, and he had to write, he had to sell scripts and so forth, and that's when Walter Hill came in with Brandywine production. Another thing that's kind of noticeable that Walter Hill really is credited for, like O'Bannon credits him for script writing changes, was the whole Ash angle with Ash and the corporation. That was something that was never in the original script, so that was something that was really cool. So it was a lot of these little mistakes and stuff, but man, when they just didn't know what they were gonna do, and then when Scott was starting to storyboard this film, and it was like, and they found the monster when by Giger. Giger already had designed the creature with his artwork before, and they saw his artwork and were like, Scott just knew. He saw, he's like, that's it. We've already found our monster. Like, the hardest thing was already done. They didn't know how they were going to do this, but that's the hardest thing. So yeah, it's a true masterclass in just filmmaking. Utterly superb. I mean, utterly superb. And it's funny now knowing that anytime you see the actors in the suits when they're walking around on LP, every single one of them at some point passed out due to heat. It's like it was grueling.
Yeah,
Like
'cause
corridor,
the seats were heavy, or the suits were heavy.
heavy. They didn't have like
they were
air
practical,
conditioning. Yeah,
and they were, a lot of them were made out of like plumbing pieces and latex. And
when some of the wide shots for the film where they're walking, they're actually, it's really Scott's kids. So they like have miniature versions, and it really wasn't until his kids passed out that Scott was like, maybe it might be this heat thing, and they're just like, oh, thanks, so yeah, so but superb film though. I can't say anything bad about that film.
no, I couldn't agree with you more. Did you what do you rate it?
Oh, a 10 out of 10, 100%.
Oh yeah, kind of
Yeah.
figured, but
Yeah. So what about you?
oh yeah, I already gave it a 9 or
9.
It's a phenomenal film.
Okay, so we're gonna move on to another masterpiece, Aliens. So Aliens is the 1986 science fiction action film. Notice I didn't mention horror, but action. Written and directed by James Cameron. It is the sequel to the 1979 science fiction horror film Alien, and the second film in the Alien franchise. The film is set in the far future. Sigourney Weaver stars as Ellen Ripley, the sole survivor in an alien attack on her ship. When communications are lost with the human colony on the moon where her crew first saw the alien creature, Ripley agrees to return to the site with a unit of colonial marines. We got guns, we got knives, we got... Anyways, to investigate. This film has Michael Beeman, Paul Reiser, Lance Henderson, Carrie Henn, in featuring supporting roles. Despite the success of Alien, its sequel took years to develop due to lawsuits. Yeah, the 20th Century Fox just was not interested in it. And then repeated changes in management. Although relatively inexperienced, Cameron was hired to write a story for Aliens in 1983 on the strength of his script. On his scripts for Terminator and Rambo: First Blood Part 2. The project stalled again until new Fox executive Lawrence Gordon uh, pursued a sequel. On approximately $18.5 million budget, Alien began principal photography in September 1985. Like its development, filming was tumultuous and rife with conflict between Cameron and the British crew at the legendary Pinewood Studios. The difficult shoot affected the legendary composer James Horner, who was given little time to record the music. Aliens was released on July 18th, 1986, to critical acclaim. Reviewers praised its action, but some criticized its intense intensity on some scenes. Weaver's performance garnered consistent praise. Other members of the cast were positively received, including Bill Paxton. It's game over, man. It's game over. Anyways, and Jeanette Goldstein, who played Colonial Marines. The film received several awards and nominations, including an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress for Weaver. At a time when science fiction genre was generally overlooked, Aliens earned 108.3 million, 183.3 million during its theatrical run, one of the highest grossing films of 1986 worldwide. Alien is now considered among the greatest films in the 1980s, among the best science fiction, action, and sequel films ever made, arguably equal to or better than Alien. The film is credited with expanding the franchise's scope with additions to the series and backstories and factions such as the Colonial Marines. Aliens inspired a variety of merchandise, including video games, comic books, and toys. So, what happens in this movie? So, Ellen Ripley has been in stasis for 57 years aboard an escaped shuttle after destroying her ship, the Nostromo. To escape the alien creature that slaughtered her crew. She is rescued and debriefed by her employer at the Weyland-Yutani Corporation, who are skeptical of her claim of an alien egg in a derelict ship on an exomoon. It's like nuts. On LV-426. Since it is now the site of a terraforming colony known as Hadley's Hope. After contact is lost from the colony, Weyland-Yutani Representative Carter Brooke and Colonial Marines Lieutenant Gormans ask Ripley to accompany them to investigate. Still traumatized by her alien encounters, she agrees on conditions that they exterminate the creatures. Ripley is introduced to the Colonial Marines on a spaceship with a Sulaco, but is distrustful of their android, Bishop, due to the android aboard the Nostromo having betrayed its crew to protect the alien on company orders. A dropship delivers the expedition to the surface of LV-426, where they find a battle-ravaged colony and 2 live alien facehuggers in containment tanks. But no bodies or colonists except for a traumatized young girl nicknamed Newt, who was Rebecca Jordan, the character that was. The team locates the colonists beneath the fusion power atmospheric processing station and heads to their location, descending into the corridors covered in alien secretions. Bum bum bum. So we're gonna leave you there for that one. And the reason why we're doing this, if we haven't stated it, but we really recommend people watching these. These are great films. So, if that was not mentioned before, that's why we aren't going to go over the entire process, the whole plot. But yeah, so some mistakes from Aliens. Well, due to the different cat actor, this happens, being used, Jones has noticeably changed his experience since Alien. Before the crew wakes up aboard the Sulaco, their names and IDs appear on a computer screen. The image quickly crossfades to a shot of the crew asleep in their cryotubes. But if you look carefully, just before the text vanishes, you can see that Private Hudson, the name is missing from the manifest. The acid blood of the xenomorphs rarely seems to damage the walls and floors like it did in Alien. This is especially noticeable in enclosed space like the air shaft and the APC and the elevator where Hicks gets burned, but nothing else does. The elevator, this is hilarious. The elevator the Queen uses is actually not big enough for her to fit in. So that's kind of funny. Again, superb. Where I feel like Alien was a masterclass in filmmaking. This was essentially just a masterclass in iconic filmmaking. That makes sense. Like, if that's such a thing. Superb movie.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is a really good one as well. Definitely way more action oriented. I mean,
100%.
obviously because Cameron did it, and he just was coming off of Rambo and the Terminator, which are
Yeah.
their action films.
Maybe arguably, yes. They are arguably action films, yes.
So,
Um,
with that being said, I mean, that's what these are. They're action film. This is an action film at this point for
Yeah.
the most part. Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely a vast difference between the two, but I truly enjoyed this one just as much as I enjoyed the first one. They're both phenomenal. I would have to say at least an 8.5, almost a 9 for this one.
yeah, I mean, for me to lower it any less than 10 would be insane for me. I absolutely love this film. So, the legendary Canon FD lenses were used for this film, which gives it that extremely distinct look from the previous film camera and lenses used in the original Alien. So, and yeah, it was an interesting choice for him to use a different film stock too, as far as like not a real anamorphic shot. He shot it on spherical lens, and it's very interesting. So you don't get that letterbox effect, with the bars black on the top and bottom. Just if you have a 16:9 TV, you don't get any bars at all. So it's really in your face. It was really a interesting decision choice for filmmaking. I think it gives it more of a like eerie for the first film with eerie corridors and stuff. This one kind of it's much more lit. There's not as many dark.
Well, they
creepy
opened it
areas.
up more.
They open it up, yeah, with the wider, with the spherical, so you don't get the anamorphic. So you're kind of just it's kind of in your face more and it helps with that action. So 100%. Um, we're gonna go from probably the top of the mountain, and then that shit just rolls down real fast. So you're gonna start the
Yeah, let's start this roller coaster ride down.
Let's start down. Yes.
So I'll be reading for Alien 3, which was released in 1992. It's an American science fiction horror film directed by David Fincher and written by David Giller, Walter Hill, and Larry Ferguson from a story by Vincent Ward. It stars Sigourney Weaver reprising her role as Ellen Ripley. It is the third installment in the Alien franchise. This film faced problems during production, including shooting without a script and the attachment of various screenwriters and directors. Fincher, in his feature directorial debut, was brought in to direct after a proposal version with Vincent Ward and director was canceled during pre-production. Alien 3 was released on May 22nd,
Yeah.
1992, while
It's very late. It's
Yeah,
very late,
and-
guys. we record the stuff pretty late. So.
underperformed at the American box office. It earned over 100 million outside North America. The film received mixed reviews and was regarded as inferior to its previous installments. Fincher has since disowned this film, citing studio interference and deadlines. It was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects by 7 Saturn awards: Best Science Fiction Film, Best Actress for Weaver, Best Supporting Actor for Dutton, Best Director or Direction for Fincher, Best Writing for Giler and Hill, and Ferguson. So apparently all three of them got one. And Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation and MTV Movie Award for Best Action Sequence in 2003. A revised version of the film known as the Assembly Cut was released without Fincher's involvement, which received a warmer reception.
Yeah.
So for the plot, set right after the events of Aliens 1986, Ripley and the alien organism are the only survivors of the colonial marine spaceship, the Sulaco. Following an escape pod's crash on a planet housing a penal colony populated by violent male inmates, additional roles are played by Charles Dance, Brian Glover, Charles S. Dutton, Ralph Brown, Paul McGaney, Danny Webb, Lawrence Henriksen, Holt McClaney, and Pete Postwaite, and Daniel Edmond. Following the events of Aliens, an egg hatches aboard the colonial marine spaceship the Sulaco, releasing a facehugger. A fire starts, and the ship's computer launches an escape pod containing Ellen Ripley and young girl Newt Hicks and a damaged android Bishop. All four are in cryonic stasis. The pod crash lands on Furiona Fury 161, a foundry and maximum security correctional facility inhabited by male inmates with genetic predisposition for antisocial behavior. The inmates recover the crashed pod and its passengers. The facehugger is seen approaching inmates Thomas Murphy's dog, Spike. Ripley is awakened by Clemens, the prison doctor, who informs her that she is the sole survivor. She is warned by the prisoner warden, Harold Andrews, that her presence may have disruptive effects. Ripley insists that Clemens perform an autopsy on Newt and that her and Hicks' bodies be subsequently burned, secretly fearing that Newt may be carrying an alien embryo. Despite protests from the warden and his assistant, Aaron, the autopsy is conducted and no embryo is found. The funeral proceeds in the foundry with spiritual leader Dylan delivering a speech as the deceased are dropped into the furnace. Elsewhere in the prison, a quadrupedal alien bursts from Spike. And so from there, we'll move over to the actual errors of this film.
Plenty of errors in this film.
God, yeah.
Like them doing this movie.
Yeah, that was probably their biggest foobar. So one of the
German foobar.
So one of the mistakes is the alien that comes out of the dog is actually a lot bigger than the than the actual dog. Seconds after it appears, this only applies to the theatrical version. As the extended version, the alien comes out of an ox. There's actual audio problems when Aaron attacks Bishop. Too, he yells "effing android," but the words don't match the movement of his lips. It's about an hour, 41 minutes, and 45 seconds into the film. There's actually a continuity mistake in the cafeteria scene. Ripley gets a square of what looks like cake and pours half a glass of orange juice. When she sits down, her glass is full. That's about 27 minutes into the movie, but when you get to the 27-minute and 50-second mark is when you actually get to see the glass. So another mistake in the first Alien movie, a few drops of spilled alien blood eats through the 2 floors of the space freighter. Yet at the end of the movie, when the alien violently explodes and its entire blood supply is vaporized, the surrounding steel wall floor are not affected at all. They don't melt, and Ripley isn't affected even though she's like a few feet away from the alien when it blows up. Also, as Ripley and Dylan lure the alien into the piston chamber, Morse closes them just in time. But if you watch closely, he actually misses the switch. This is an hour, 38 minutes, and 15 seconds into the movie. So this one is, to rate it, anything higher than probably a 7.5 would be like a 6 to a 7.5. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's just kind of, it's there.
It's got some great moments.
Yeah.
I am gonna. It's got really great moments with some great scenes. It's got one of my favorite scenes actually in all the movies, when the warden is like, "There's nothing here. You're just riling up these guys, blah blah blah," and then the alien just comes out of the ceiling, just grabs it, and everyone's just like, like scared, scared shit.
That scene actually gave me a fear of drop ceiling as a child.
I'm sorry.
I know. I mean, it was silly as hell, but
I just always thought that was the funniest thing. Oh, and then there's a great line where where Ripley's like, I'm gonna go find this thing in the and he's like, oh, where are you gonna look? He's like, the basement, and it's like, that's where monsters are at, and the guy's like, this place don't got a basement. It's like it's all a basement or something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but it was some great. There was definitely some great moments in there. I saw the potential. I'm a huge Fincher fan, by the way. Like, seen all of his films. Absolutely top tier film director. He's done. If you don't know who he is, he did Fight Club. He did Seven. He did Zodiac. He did The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. He's done The Social Network. This is a top tier director. Gone Girl, top tier director. He just did a movie on Netflix. Anybody here who got Netflix called Mackie, which is pretty good. A little different, a little bit more artistic, but
I mean, definitely has a specific style.
he does. He actually he's actually a very big innovator in film in general, in digital film especially. He was a proponent of like HD and 4K, and he shot films. He was one of the first people shooting in 4K. Actually, the whole movie Zodiac is shot in 4K on extremely expensive cameras, like almost to the level of experimental. And what they would do, because there wasn't an output for it, still 1080, they deliberately cropped it in so they could focus on scenes and control the camera. So a lot of times you were looking at actually a static shot, but in post they were doing it. So he's a real innovator, and it was a shame that this happened and he got bullied into all these decisions. Literally, this was his first film, and he just had a real bad experience. I mean, so that's why I give it a 7.5 for this film. I understand where it's coming from, and fortunately, that film did not that wasn't like, oh yeah, even though he had that for a long time. Oh yeah, you're the Alien 3 guy. He eventually, I felt like, definitely got away from that and did absolutely phenomenal films. So like Seven and Fight Club. I mean, can I say any more? like, so
yeah. So I think from there we can actually, if
yes.
you're ready, move on.
Yeah. So we're gonna go to the weirdest of the films. We're gonna go a little bit Frenchy on this one. Sorry for anybody who's from France, but yeah, this is a very different style film. Very orange. So, but yeah, so Alien Resurrection is a 1997 American science fiction horror film directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, written by Joss Whedon, and starring Sigourney Weaver and Winona Ryder. It is the fourth installment of the Alien franchise and was filmed at the 20th Century Fox Studios in L.A., California. Sets 200 years after the preceding installment, Alien 3. Ellen Ripley is cloned and an alien queen is surgically removed from her body. The United Systems military, the USM, hope to breed aliens to study and research on the spaceship, the USM Argus, using human hosts abducted and delivered to them by a group of mercenaries. The aliens escape their enclosures, and Ripley and the mercenaries attempt to escape and destroy the Argus before it reaches Earth. Additional roles are played by Ron Perlman, Dan Hedaya, J.E. Freeman, Brad Dourif, and Michael Wincott. Alien Resurrection had its premiere in Paris on November 6, 1997, and was released to the public on November 12th. It grossed $47.8 million in the United States and Canada, the least successful of the Alien series in that market. It grossed $161.1 million worldwide, and the film received mixed reviews from critics, who criticized the screenplay while praising Weaver's performance and the direction. The film was nominated for 6 Saturn Awards, including Best Science Fiction Film, Best Actors for Weaver, Best Supporting Actress for Ryder, and best direction for Jeanette. A sequel to Resurrection was planned. Was in fact planned. That's interesting. As Josh Whedon had written an Earth-set script for Alien 5. Weaver was not interested in this setting, but has remained open to reprising her role as Ellen Ripley for a 5th installment on the conditions that she likes the story. More sequels were planned to follow Resurrection, but were ultimately abandoned as the crossover series arrived with the 2004 film Alien vs. Predator, along with its sequels. I'm sorry, prequels, including the 2012 Prometheus, which we started this with. The storylines of Resurrection have been continued in the comic series, Aliens versus Predator versus the Terminator, and books like Aliens Original Sin and Alien Sea of Sorrows. 200 years after the events of Alien 3, military scientists on the space vessel USM Arga creates a clone of Ellen Ripley, designated as Ripley 8, using DNA from blood samples taken before her death. The Xenomorph Queen DNA have been combined with Ripley so that clones grow up with the embryo inside it. The scientists extract the embryo, raised it, and collect its eggs while keeping Ripley 8 alive for further study. As a result of the xenomorph's DNAs inside her, the clone has enhanced strength and reflexes, acid blood, and a psychic link with the xenomorphs. Additionally, the xenomorph's genetic memories allow the clone to have some of Ripley's memories. A group of mercenaries consisting of Elgin, Jonier, Christie, Verus, Hillard, and Cal arrive on Argus on their ship Betty, and deliver several abducted humans in stasis. The military scientists use the humans as hosts for the aliens, raising several adult xenomorphs for studies. The Betty crew soon encounters Ripley 8, calls Cal recognizes her name and tries to kill her, suspecting that Ripley 8 may be used to create xenomorphs. But the creatures have already been cloned. The mature xenomorphs escape confinement by killing one of their own to use its acid blood to burn through their enclosure. And that's where we're going to leave that story. Check it out. It's still a watchable film. So some errors in this film. Continuity mistake. Ripley kills the alien in the corridor after it has killed the first member of the Betty crew, but there is no melting of the deck or bulkheads from the creature's acid blood. Also, the Betty crew seems unaffected by all the acid. That's at 46 minutes into the movie, when Hillard throws the basketball at Ripley. You can clearly see the white tape on Ripley's hand, which was used to catch the ball. This is at 23 minutes and 10 seconds. When Cal spills Jonah's battery acid drink, she throws the boxing glove on the table. When she does, it actually bumps the camera. This is at 28 minutes and 15 seconds. That was not intended. I always actually remember that scene. I thought it was part of the thing, but during the surgery, Ripley is cut in the chest below her breast. When Ryan checks the scar, it appears between her breasts at 3 minutes and 25 seconds to 6 minutes and 45 seconds. The end of the movie, as the ship is approaching Earth, the Earth is actually backwards. Africa is obviously pointing in the wrong direction, as if the image had been reversed. When Dr. Wayne checks Cal's gun, he says, "You really are way too trusting." But his mouth movements seem to show him saying something else. It appears to be something along the lines of far too trusting, as opposite to way too trusting. This is about 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 30 seconds into this film. Okay, that is the last of the talking points for that. So, how do you want to end this resurrection? Do you want to what do you think about this? Any feelings, fuzzy or not?
Not really. And if by fuzzy you mean moldy, then yes, very much so.
Is it all that yellow?
Yeah. The only like there are memorable moments in this,
sort of, I guess.
but they're not memorable all for the right reasons. Like, I don't know. It's just hard to say. Like the orange, like you said, that made it really hard. I mean, realistically, I think I'm just gonna jump to my rating for this one.
Okay.
5. It's watchable. It's a movie.
Yeah.
It's a movie. It's decent enough. It's watchable, but it's by no means an alien. Like, to me, it's not one of the
so
movie.
different. Yeah, it's a very different direction. I'm with you actually. It's oddly enough, we are literally been in the same ballpark throughout all these. Yeah, I'll give it a 5. It's literally like, you could just leave and be like, okay.
Yeah, if you don't watch it don't hurt.
Michael Wincott's phenomenal. If you knew who he was, I guess he was most famous for being in The Crow. He's the villain in that, the original Crow with Brandon Lee. I guess that would be what most people would know him from. Phenomenal. He had a very specific voice. When you hear him talk, he had a real raspy voice. Phenomenal actor. What can I say about Ron Perlman? He's been in.
Love him. He's Hellboy.
He's in everything. Yeah. And then, of course, going back to, again, we just have our Lord of the Rings alumni here, Brad Dwarf, who was, of course, Wormtongue from the Peter Jackson films. I mean, I don't know. It was really weird. The camera was in everybody's face. It was just coming from a very different filmmaking style. Very orientated, very French style. So
there was just too many cooks, really, in this series. Like,
yeah,
they went from the original to like they just kept switching directors, and then it seemed like writers changed. Like, so there was no consistency. It was just just do this, just do whatever you would do. They made it their own film, which wouldn't be bad, but the direction of the films, in my opinion, they changed. It went from, like, the first two kind of stayed like similar-ish, and then this one was just like, I'm not even part of this franchise.
Yeah, this one has some real weird. There's just some unusual decisions. I just remember. I always remember this movie for Brad Dwarf. Who kisses he's one of the scientists, the weird scientists, and
of course he is.
There's an alien xenomorph in one of the containments, and it's like staring at him, and he's like, nobody's around. He's like looking. He's like, he goes over up to it, and he's like showing his teeth, and then he's like, he's like, he's like trying to like kiss it and shit, and then the alien's like, ain't gonna have that, and he's like, oh, okay, and then he takes the key and he does the famous, pushes the button, and it, and then he's like, oh, you do learn, because it learns that's like, that you push that button, pain or whatever, if they feel pain. Interesting thing about design of the original Alien, going back to the first film, H.R. Geiger, the first film, actually the film, not Prometheus, because I know we were going by that order, but it was initially Giger who was like, we're not gonna have eyes on this thing, because he thought it would be scarier if you, the audience, and even the people being pursued, had no idea where it was looking. So how does it see? Where does it, so that was a decision by Giger. But yeah, again, just 5 out of 10. Just, I mean, these everything's watchable, but it's everyone's taste. I think a lot of people actually will enjoy this film for what it is. It's got a lot of smirk. It's got the most smirkiness of any of the movies. But yeah, um, but that concludes our Alien episode. For those who
Yeah.
stayed and watched, and we appreciate you always. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.